I'm going to start in true Catholic fashion because it is 9 o'clock at night here in Paris. I'm going to start with the beer. So there we go. I hope uh, I hope some of you have a beer as well, even though it's noontime there. Or dawn is what 11 or 12 there in Dallas.
Two.
Two, two there. Okay, yeah. So all right. Anyway, here's to everyone. Thanks for joining.
You were never good with math.
That is true. Good with figures. The other element for Kappa Sig I thought was beer and breasts. So there's French for me there. So yesterday was Bastille Day in France. So Bastille Day is the equivalent of like a July 4th. So it's July 14th here, celebrating the French Revolution. So it's a big deal here in France. So I'm based in Paris. Um, what I'd like to do is make this just a more of a chat, a discussion. I've got some slides I'm going to share just a way of kind of a bit of a round table on going through some content, but jump in, throw in a question, a comment, or even challenge me on anything I'm saying. Whatever is good. We'll just have a nice hour of discussion here. Okay. So first of all, I thought I'd show you where I am in Paris. So I'm going to change my background for just a moment here. All right. So, ta-da, Paris. So this is live shot, live cam of Paris. So I live in the southwest side of the city, and just about a 15-minute walk you see from the Eiffel Tower behind me there.
What arrondissement is that?
I'm in the 15th. So 15th arrondissement, and the 15, the arrondissement in Paris are like a snail, and so still really close to the center. If I pan over a little bit in the background, you might be able to see a gold dome. That's the Invalides, which is where Napoleon is buried. It's a huge, huge building. Further on over in the distance, you can see Notre Dame, and there's construction cranes and all that working on repairing it. Luckily, it survived last year. All the other monuments are kind of out here. Paris is a very level city, similar to like Washington, D.C., due to height restrictions. So where I live is one of the few areas where you actually have towers. So anyway, it gives you a sense of live cam of Paris right now. Cloudy in evening. We're really far north here. We're kind of like the equivalent of where Vancouver would be. And so because of that, we have really late summer evenings. So right about now, it'll stay light till about 10:30 or 11 at night. So, okay. So let me go back to my French background here. Or actually, I'll do more of my Frenchy look. Here we are. Stereotypical French there. With my baguette, a bit of wine or a beer, and cheese in a car. All right, so let me get to it. What I want to show you today, cover three big topics. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly here, but stop me again if you have a kind of a point you want to make. So one topic is about life in Europe, what it's like to work and live in Europe after a really lengthy career here. Secondly, I want to talk about our robots and what I do, because I work now the last 8 years for a robotics company. And then finally, in a more kind of notorious moment, I was in the Miracle on the Hudson 11 years ago. And so I'll talk a bit about what that was like if you're interested. And I show a picture there of Don. You can see Don and Elliot. That's pretty recent. That was last November. So there's a story behind why I'm showing Don and Elliot. I'll get to that in a little while. So, okay, so that's what it's all about. I'm going to go through the first part especially quickly, life in Europe, because I think unless there's someone who really is interested in how you might work in Europe, this is kind of what I've done, and we can go through some of the lessons learned. So I've been in Europe for 29 years. So started way back in 91. I was backpacking through Europe over 6 to 9 months, just after the wall came down. As you know, the wall came down in around 89, the Velvet Revolution, and so I used that as an opportunity to really go through all through Eastern Europe, Russia, and so forth. So, real opportunity to learn about that new part of Europe that was just emerging. I spent some time in Oxford in the UK. I got an MBA in '92 at a prestigious business school called IMD in Switzerland. Then spent a number of years in London with Bain, a consulting group. I moved to Germany and started a very long career at HP, 16 years at HP in 3 locations: Germany, France. Grenoble is tucked near the Alps, and then finally here in Paris. I left HP in 2010, kind of as one of the things I was doing differently in my life after the Hudson plane crash, and then joined my current company, SoftBank Robotics. Previously was a French startup, and just converted over to SoftBank about 5 years ago. SoftBank's a huge Japanese conglomerate. I'll talk a bit more about that later.
Hey, Eric, just real quick, making sure you're not screen sharing anything yet because we're not seeing anything.
Oh, you're not? Oh, okay. Shit. Okay, here, hold on a minute here. Thought I was. Okay, let me. Thanks for the flag. Okay, can you see me now?
Yeah.
My screen. All right. Thanks, Matt. Okay, let me go back into this here. Okay, I was only on slide 2 anyway. So, all right. What I did was just go through this history of where I've been. So you can see different things I've done: backpacking, Oxford, Switzerland, London, 3 different places with HP, and then most recently now in Paris. Okay. All right. So 29 years in Europe. What I would say is, if I want to think about, well, what did I learn about all of this? Things to consider if someone is about ready to, especially Matt, if you're counseling young Capasigs that are interested in moving to Europe, first of all, to consider what kind of a move is it. I really had my heart into moving to Europe, so I was considering it more of a permanent move rather than just temporary. Permanent in the sense that I really did a kind of a crapshoot and got an MBA over here, really to show employers I was serious. And that move tended to be a good shot because then it really demonstrated that I wanted to stay in Europe. The risk was that if I decided not to stay in Europe, going back to the U.S. with a European MBA would have had potentially issues with would companies really value that or not. So that was kind of my strategy to make the jump. You see a lot of Americans that will do similar things. They'll come and get a master's or do advanced studies to really get roots in Europe and then use that to make the jump to get a job in Europe. Very difficult to actually just out of the blue move over here. I know Don spent 4 or 5 years, I think, in London as an expat. And Dave, you just mentioned that you're now in Amsterdam, thanks to your wife's move as an expat. You tend to see a lot less expat packages anymore. It's relatively few and far between compared to, say, the 90s or the early 2000s. They can be very expensive for companies, and so they often just try to hire locally. But otherwise, either if you can, through a connection or somehow build a case to move over, it can be difficult. Just in the reverse of Europeans trying to work in the U.S., you have to kind of have a strategy on how to make a jump. A key factors here, though, once you do get in, you are in. So once you find your way in, you can definitely definitely you can build a career over here and decide to stay. Europe in general, you'll see, has less downside risk, I would say, to a career or life, because less risk of getting sacked and more stability, more permanence in the jobs that you have, but also potentially less upside. There's a lot less job mobility in general, although that's been changing in recent years. UK tends to be more like the US, but France is a kind of a much more rigid job market. One key benefit: in most European countries, you have complete healthcare coverage. And that's a huge benefit with universal healthcare. You don't have to even think about it. There are co-pays, there are different schemes depending on the country, but in general, there is what you call universal health care, and it makes a huge difference. Systems are generally tend to be pretty good. When you bake in the cost of health care, the cost of taxes, all the different expenses, you'll find that, that what you might think at first would be high European taxes actually ends up being more equivalent when all things considered. Because, a lot of, healthcare tends to be rolled up into your existing taxes as opposed to paying it on top. So that's all part of what you need to think about for tax and retirement implications. Retirement systems in Europe tend to be more robust, I would say. Although you have less of of kind of the U.S. mode of a retirement, individual retirement packages. It tends to be more kind of collective, if you will, in Europe. All things to consider. And then a lot of people, if they can, decide, well, that's the time to come to Europe, is do retirement. Maybe buy a house over here, buy something. A lot of investment properties. Huge number of residents in France actually come from the U.S. or other parts of Europe to retire. So certainly an option as well. Okay. Right. With all that in mind, I jump now to my robot part, but unless any comments or Don, you lived over here. Maybe you have some other observations about living in Europe. Dave, you just arrived as well. Any thoughts?
It was it was a great time. As far as we spent 3 years in London, it's a great hopping off place. We did a lot of traveling and saw Eric quite a bit, as far as many trips down to Paris and that. But if you do get the opportunity to work in Europe, you definitely want to take advantage of the travel opportunities, because most of the adjoining countries are like the neighboring state that you can travel to very quickly and see a lot of historical places. So it was a great time in our lives.
Yeah. In fact, Don went even further and spent several years in Australia as well. So kind of a global expatter, if you will. So.
Yep, now I'm in the country of Texas.
All right. So any other comments on life in Europe or a career internationally? Any other questions? All right. Let me jump over. Oops, my computer's not advancing. There we go. Okay. So
Eric,
yeah.
real quick. So did you localize? Did you become a citizen, or how did that all work, since you weren't like on an expat program?
Yeah, I did. I became a citizen after moving from Germany into France, and so it was just a matter of time. France has a system, I think, like a lot of European countries. If you live here 5 years as a permanent resident, you can begin the process to become naturalized. But it differs by country. It's a real key point, is that even though EU has a lot of common laws and similarities between countries, just like in the US, each country can have differences. So France will allow you to have 2 passports. So I have a French passport, as well as I, of course, keep my US passport. But Belgium, for example, only allows 1 passport. So if you're Belgium, you're Belgium or something else, but you can't be both. So it really depends. You'd have to check that out. UK tends to be pretty flexible. I have friends in the UK that have 3 passports even. So UK tends to be pretty open. Germany as well, but some countries are less so. Another key thing, and you just by your question trigger it, of course, is long lost relatives. If you can prove that you have like an Irish grandfather, or if you have an Italian grandfather, I think, that is a ticket to get a European passport. And so a lot of people do that to kind of basically give them diversity. So that way, if they become a citizen, then they can, maybe invest easier, get property easier, have a lot more flexibility, even work. So that's another factor to keep in mind. I've met a lot of people over the years that had relatives like an Italian or especially Irish. Those are the 2 nationalities that have most of that flexibility. And and they never knew it. They didn't. They said, "Oh, I didn't know if I have an Italian grandfather, I can actually become a citizen." So yeah, definitely worth looking into if you know if you have that situation. Okay, let's talk about robots. So I work for SoftBank, which is a Japanese conglomerate, and one among many things we do is robotics. And so I've been with them about 8 years now. And I'm going to talk today about Wiz, several things, in fact. So this is our robot Wiz you see on the screen, and I'm focused on that robot right now. My role is to lead operations for the European region. So we have an ambition to sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands eventually, of these robotic vacuum cleaners. And so I lead the operational side of what we do in Europe. Okay. So a couple things then about SoftBank, who we are. We're a relatively young company, but still very successful. A lot of ups and downs. You've probably seen us in headlines over the last couple of years. We've amassed a huge $100 billion investment fund with external resources and gone on a shopping spree and bought the largest stake in Uber. We own WeWork, which is the co-working space. We bought Sprint and then sold it, or sold a share of it to not Verizon, but
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile. Thank you. Yeah, to T-Mobile, and then now we're selling the rest of it off to T-Mobile. We became probably most famous because of our original stake in Alibaba, where an initial 20 million investment in Alibaba is now worth something like 130 billion. So classified, I think, is the all-time best investment ever made by anyone. So that's a little bit about SoftBank, but read up on us if you'd like to know more. Quite a fascinating company. The founder and chairman of the company is a lot like a Richard Branson kind of a figure. He's kind of like the Richard Branson of Japan, is the way to think of him. Okay, we have robots. So one division, very small division compared to everything else, is robots. And you can see we bridge them into several different areas. One is security and on dangerous sites, and we have a robot called Spot that does that. And another, we do communications robots, and I spent the last 6 years working in that area. Two robots called Pepper and Now. They're humanoid robots, and they work like in a hotel as a reception area. They would be used in schools, in hospitals. They could be, you name it, anything you would need in a kind of a reception, greeting mode, education, retail. Tough market though, because they're expensive robots and the use cases are difficult to prove. Different from Wiz though, which is a pretty straightforward use case as a vacuum cleaner. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So I'm going to show now a video, if I can switch into that here. This is from last week, gained worldwide headlines. Just the two robots I've been talking about now, which is Pepper and Spot. And here they are. So the reason for this was that the baseball games in Japan, they can't have anyone in the stand. So it's a bit of a promotional stunt that puts robots in to entertain and basically be the audience. Okay, I think you guys get the idea. Yeah. So, right. that's more of a promotional thing. Got a lot of global attention, millions and millions of hits on TV and everything. But it shows you a bit of the breadth of the robots in our portfolio. So the Spot robot is used then like on a construction site, dangerous like a nuclear site. If they're wanting to survey, you need agility to get around in a very dangerous environment if it's radioactive, what have you. Kind of a scary looking robot, but then that video makes it look a lot more fun, if you will, with the flags and all that. So on to Wiz then. Why Wiz? Well, actually, the Wiz robot itself is demonstrated to have a lot of performance improvements. Basically, better than a regular vacuum, meaning better cleaning, more energy efficient, covers more space. If you think about the current cleaning environment, if you're, and maybe some of you are in that space or have that need, if you need to clean a hotel or a conference center or an office, getting staff is a huge issue. So recruiting staff, keeping them, training them, making them motivated. Because frankly now, if you're 20-something coming out of university, not a university, maybe out of high school, and you're very agile with your phone and all of that, maybe the last thing you want to do is go and be a janitor. Also immigration issues, all of that. So it makes recruiting to being a janitor a real issue. So if you can robotize part of it and have a robot there that does the vacuuming and actually then your existing janitors kind of become robot operators, a bit more motivating for them. The robot we consider it a cobot, meaning it's working side by side the employees, but it also helps you have a more reliable workforce because the robot's always going to be there, not going to call in absent, and performing every day. So we're seeing a lot of take-up. Already we've had contracts for over 10,000 of these robotic vacuums around the world. So that's what we're introducing now. I'll give you an example here. One of our customers, you can hear what a customer has to say about it.
My name is David McLaughlin. I'm the general manager of the Hilton Garden in Gilroy. We have a lot of guests from all over the world. 137 rooms, especially on the weekdays, are very busy property. The main concern we had prior to getting Wiz was a lack of attention to detail, simply due to time restrictions. My favorite thing about Wiz is basically just the time we get back for our staff. And it's so simple to use. It's a simple matter of scanning a barcode, actually walking the route that you'd like to be vacuumed, returning to the barcode, and pressing save. As a team, couldn't be happier with Wiz. The results have far exceeded our expectations, and it really just allows us more time to take care of the small details within the property. Our number one goal was an improvement in our cleanliness scores. Our guest cleanliness scores have gone from 82 to 90% in just a few months, which is really unheard of. Wiz is a great team player. If we lost Wiz, we'd be very upset as a team. Everyone's become very accustomed to the great job Wiz does, and actually everyone loves seeing Wiz in action.
Okay.
Eric, how much are they?
So the contract for a Wiz is $4.99 a month. So we don't sell them as hardware. It's basically a robot as a service.
Okay.
So $4.99 a month, and that includes all the servicing, all the warranty, guarantee. You never own the unit. You're just basically renting or using it as a service, and which in the cleaning industry is pretty revolutionary. And so it's kind of refreshing actually. And the way we think about it is that, every industry, we've all seen it, every single industry is getting transformed at some point. Like over the last 20 years, one thing after the other, be it hotels or taxis or, a way we buy property or the way we do computing, everything gets transformed. Cleaning is like the last thing. It hasn't been transformed. And so this is really the beginning of what we think is a huge transformation, bringing in automation where it makes sense. And given all the pressures people feel, like even with the COVID, our value proposition has changed because we used to be saying, with $4.99 a month, the robot pays for itself if you can use it like 3 hours a day. And after that, you're already in profit from day one. So that used to be a really big selling proposition for us for Wiz. Now with COVID, we've got like hospitals and retirement centers and all that saying we want as few people as possible to be near patients. And so having a robot do the vacuuming is really interesting for them because it's basically kind of germ free and it's clean and it's cleaning up the environment. And we have testing to show that the brushes in the robot actually do much more consistently and much deeper cleaning. And so you get a better environment overall. So all of that leads in to say that we believe the time has really come now. So it's an interesting time for the transformation.
University markets will be good for it. Too bad I can't pick up beer cans.
That's, it can hold a beer on the top of it. And we are looking at versions that will be, this is a vacuuming, but we're looking at like a scrubber. And so where it can actually do liquids and like hard surfaces more than carpets. But so there'll be a scrubber version. Also maybe a version that helps to sterilize the environment if it's going around an office at night and can then kind of make sure that there's no microbes or COVID stuff, overnight. So anyway, so that's all to come in the future, but it's a pretty exciting area. And this is where I guess a comment I would say about in general about this is it's really fun being in robotics because you really every day see the technology as it is kind of on the cusp of transforming things and making a difference. So yeah, it's really a cool time to be in robotics.
Hey, Eric, I have a question for you.
Sure.
That's a commercial application. Do you guys have residential or,
No, we don't. Our market is 100% B2B. Yeah, because the size of the robot is kind of like knee height, okay?
Sure.
And so different from a Roomba. So to think about a Roomba, it's more like I kind of like call it a goldfish because the Roomba doesn't really remember anything the next day. It just starts again brand new and it does a decent job for a home, but it's not memorizing the routes. Our robot, as you saw in the video, is actually memorizing. You teach it once and it knows exactly where to go. And so it can do that repetitively 1,000 times. And the way it does it, by the way, just a bit on the technology, because you first think, okay, is it doing that by GPS? No. Is it doing it by Wi-Fi? No, because Wi-Fi is really inconsistent in businesses or locations, anywhere you go. So we didn't want the robot to be Wi-Fi dependent. So what the robot does is it looks at a QR code that's on the wall, and then it memorizes exactly every single inch of movement from that QR code. So like going around walls or moving along, a hallway, and it maps it out. And then as it repeats doing the route, it gets better and better every time. And so it kind of optimizes the routes. And we're even now introducing a feature which would be if you have kind of an open space, you could do the surroundings of that open space, and then the robot would do the fill in. So as well. So it's really cool, the technology. We work with the leading provider of indoor autonomous navigation for robots. It's a company called Brain, based in San Diego, and so we've got partial ownership of Brain. SoftBank does, but they actually provide the software for the entire industry. So you'll see the Brain software in a lot of places, and they're actually now applying that same software for like Walmart's. So the robots that do cleaning in grocery stores or do shelf analysis in grocery stores are using the same technology. So it's pretty cool. Any other questions about robotics?
Where are they selling? Are you selling more in the U.S. or in Europe or Asia?
So we started the home market, of course, because our parent company is Japanese. Home market is Japan, and we've branched out into Asia, into the U.S., and now just starting in Europe. We've actually got a lot of great traction in the U.S., and one of our early customers is Facebook, actually. So the Facebook campus in Silicon Valley is using a bunch of these, like 10 different buildings for Facebook. A lot of other companies, hotels, like you see in the example here, are really gravitating to it. Hotels in Vegas, the best use case would be, in Vegas you have the super long corridors in hotels. That's perfect for the robot. Robot's not so good at going into hotel rooms because, robot can't open the doors and there's a lot of furniture in the rooms. But those long corridors, that's perfect for the robot to execute. And I guess the other thing I would point out in robotics, and then I'll switch over to the Hudson, is that, one thing we learned in the humanoid side, because you saw in that video at the stadium with the humanoid robots dancing, and it's quite cute, the robots doing their dances. But the use cases are quite limited. And so instead of a robot that tries to do everything and does everything kind of in a mediocre way, like the Pepper robot is fun and it does like 25 things, but all of them kind of average. And if you can have a robot that really focuses in and does one thing really well, like Whiz, vacuuming, autonomous robotic vacuuming, that then seems to be the secret sauce in robotics. And so you see a lot of companies really focusing on, right, how can they find those single use cases. So in this example, you may go to a hotel and see 3 or 4 different robots. You'll see a robot at reception to check you in. You'll see a robot that will deliver your room service, either the meal or something you forgot. You'll see the robot doing the vacuuming. You might even see a robot in the restaurant. And so these single use case robots are really the way to go. So if you're interested in getting into robotics, that is very much the trend in the industry. Okay.
My name is David McLaughlin. I'm the general manager of the Hilton Garden in Gilroy. We have a lot of guests.
Let me zoom in here. I've started subtitles here. Hold on. Let me go back into this. All right, ready for a bit of a miracle on the Hudson? So Don knows this story really well. He's been part of it for 11 years now. And so, as you can imagine, you can guess from the title, I found myself on the flight that landed in the Hudson. And I was on a business trip. At the time, that was when I was with HP. I was working, still in Europe, of course, but then I was in New York for a conference and going to spend the weekend with a friend in Virginia. So I was on the plane on my way to see her. And then, boom, there, found myself aboard the Miracle on the Hudson. And it was one of the most amazing things you'd ever experience in a life, is suddenly finding yourself on a plane that's about to crash. It's the kind of thing that just it's sudden. It is no way to control it. So many emotions going through your mind, and also tragically, in most of the cases, you don't survive. And so in this case, it's really amazing that I was able to survive. And, all my thanks go to the guy in the photo here. So clearly that's Sully, as you can see. Sully, this is about 6 months after the crash. So he came to meet with the manufacturer of the aircraft, which is Airbus. And so he came in France, and at that point, you had probably seen him. He's on the Super Bowl. He had been on 60 Minutes. He had big reunions with all the passengers. I think he was on Oprah. He had done all those things right after the crash. But here I was in Paris and had kind of feeling way off in left field. And lo and behold, he comes to France, and we got together and just hit it off. And he and I have been good friends the whole time. So I still stay in touch with him, probably a couple times a year. Talk to Sully, as well as the co-pilot Jeff Skiles. The portrayal of Sully in the movie Sully, as well as Jeff, were just spot on. So if the way that Tom Hanks portrayed Sully was so true to form, you really got the sense, okay, yeah, that is Sully. He's just very down to earth, not pretentious, very approachable, very rational, very clear thinking, very articulate. All of that came through in spades with Tom Hanks in the movie. So, Okay, I'm going to run through a whole bunch of slides here in pretty fast fashion, but it gives you an idea of what happened. So, so first of all, and if we think about this crisis, let me tell you about who Sully is. You probably know about him already, but he had 40 years of flying experience, including time in the Air Force. He was safety chairman of the Airline and Pilots Association nationally, so he had leadership. He was from a very early age showing kind of outstanding performance at the U.S. Air Force Academy, so had a military career. So kind of always from the very beginning, the quintessential pilot. And
Eric, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The belt you were wearing on that previous picture,
Yeah.
was that actually from your seat?
No. Good question. That was a buddy of mine who just before I met Sully said, "Oh, you should wear this seatbelt." And so it's just that he's a pilot, and he gave me the belt for you to wear that day. And he said, that's the kind of belt you should wear anytime you fly commercially, because the flight attendant will walk by and think you've buckled in. So,
Sorry.
so he got a laugh out of that, yeah. So that's Sully. One thing Sully did in all of this was, I'd say lessons from someone like Sully, was he really leveraged all of his available experience in this crisis. One way he described it was this: he kind of built up 40 years of experience in his bank, all for a withdrawal in about 10 seconds to decide what's the right thing to do. So that's the way he brought all of his available experience to bear on the situation. He quickly assessed realistic alternatives, but he didn't rule out just traditional thinking. So any other pilot in that situation would have said, "I got to get to an airport." It would not have crossed their mind to say, "I'm going to ditch the plane and risk the lives of the passengers," but actually that was the best solution overall. So he quickly assessed all realistic alternatives and then chose what would be the non-traditional, only because he saw that was the only way we would survive. Finally, he made decisions with a sufficient time to act. He could have been in like, do I do that? Do I do that? Do I do that? No, he analyzed the situation in about 30 seconds time, and then that was his plan, and he didn't look back. So once he made his decision and he had enough time to act, then he just stuck with his plan and went through with it. He teamed immediately. I mean, he had not even known his co-pilot until like 2 days before this trip. They're all random configurations of cockpit crews. But he knew how to team with the co-pilot. They had already been through it. They knew exactly what to do, and boom, they worked so seamlessly together, just hand in glove, back and forth. And the way they interact in the movie is exactly what they did. And imagine, these are two people, it's not like they've been working together for years. They knew each other for like 2 days. And he knew how to team immediately with the real critical people. And then he communicated the right information, but also the right amount of information. I mean, he only told the passengers 7 words. He said, "This is the captain," so he knew who he was. It's just not like a flight attendant or someone else. He said, "This is the captain." He said, "Brace for impact." Now, that you might think, well, what was it? To a passenger, that's kind of vague. Like, he could have said, "We're going to crash," but then there'd be panic. He could have said, "Don't worry, I'm doing this," but then he's starting to get too much information. He's saying, "We're going to land in the water, but I think we're going to be okay." Then it gets, a whole dialogue as to what's going on. Instead, all he said was, "This is the captain, brace for impact." He just needed the passengers to start to get ready to prepare to crash. That also is the code name for the crew that says we're essentially going down. So that is the information he needed to communicate. Just the right amount of it, the right information, very succinct. And then boom, he got off the microphone and focused again on how he's going to land the aircraft. So, and then finally through all this, you saw he just remained incredibly calm. You're like, wow, he had the lives of everyone in his hands and just remained super calm. So really amazing lessons for leadership of someone, how they dealt with the crisis. So here's a few pictures of what happened. We actually hit and then landed. And for those of you, I guess most of you will know New York. We actually were right next to where the Intrepid is. That's in the circle there. I actually was seated right behind the exit row. So I was one of the very last people that got out of the aircraft. In fact, probably the very last, because I first went out onto the other wing. And right now, if you're looking forward, you're on the left side. But I first went out on the right side, and it seemed like there were way too many people. In the kind of classic photos you see, everyone bunched on the wings. And so in one of those weird kind of crisis moments, I was thinking, well, I can help balance out the number of people. And so I moved over, as you see, there I am in the circle. I moved over to the left wing. When I passed through the cabin, the cabin was empty then, completely, no one was there. And in fact, at that point, I was kind of weird. I was certainly in shock, but still thinking in this kind of weird, clear way, thinking, I need to get back into my apartment in Paris. I need my keys. I got to get my passport to get back to France. I need my phone to call everyone, and everything's on speed dial. And all of that was in my briefcase, which was above the exit door. And so I thought, right, no one's here. I'm empty. The plane's empty. Water's up to my knees, but I'm not holding anyone back. So I actually got my briefcase out, and I took that out onto the wing. And in retrospect, I'm glad I did. But Sully kind of gave me this, like, not supposed to do that. And but I told him, well, I didn't block anyone. Anyway, that's a bit of a side story. There's about 100 different side stories I could tell you on this. So this is, I would say, this image is probably 10 minutes after the crash. And so the first boat is beginning to arrive. So we've been out in the cold. Temperature now is about 15 degrees. And water temperature is right at 32, so right at freezing. 2 days later, the Hudson turned to ice, completely to ice. So it was that cold out, just really frigid temperatures. About 12 passengers ended up in the water, and one of them quite seriously with the risk of hypothermia. So the conditions were it wasn't like a spring day, in the Hudson. It was really, a lot of people felt like we survived the crash, but almost risked dying in the water or drowning or all of that. By the way, if the plane had crashed like 30 seconds later, we would have been way over by the Statue of Liberty. And the plane probably would have sunk with a lot more people in the water. So just the fact that it was so close to, like as you see, the Intrepid, certainly played a part in our rescue. So here's another shot. You can see the water was starting to, was already there in that photo, and I'm circled. That's me with my red seat cushion. As I went through the door, I pulled out my seat cushion. So you can see the water already there on my ankles. Inside, it was probably around my knees. And so I'm holding the seat cushion. I didn't have a life jacket, just the seat cushion. But that's kind of where I was, bunched up in the crowd there. I then proceeded to be one of the last 3 people physically on the plane, and that's me. I'm kneeling on the wing. You can see the helicopter there in this shot, and it sprayed water everywhere. The helicopter was, as you might have noticed in the movie, was dropping divers. And so the helicopter got down really low to drop divers, and for people that were in the water. And in doing so, it sprayed water everywhere, and that water immediately turned to ice. So basically everything was coated with ice, people, wings, all of that. And I knew that I needed to kneel down, kind of get in a crutch position, otherwise I'd fall off the wing. And the guy that's third over from me, so on the other side, he did fall in, but then they plucked him out. But so I'd say maybe 15 seconds after the photo, he slipped into the water. This is the shot taken right at the exact same time as the last shot. This is the one I like the best because this really shows that day, me and the elements and everyone on board. You can see how much the water, even in that short time, was already getting up well past waist height in the doors, ceiling height at the back of the plane. And then eventually the plane didn't sink to the bottom of the Hudson, but it basically was submerged. You can see people in the rafts behind us, but then they made people that were physically on the plane, us, the last priorities to pick up. So this photo was taken by the ferry that picked up the three of us. This is a photo I took, actually. So once I got onto the ferry boat, shaking, as you can imagine, real jittery, frozen as hell. But I did manage to pull out, I had a camera in my briefcase, and I took that photo, which was used all over CNN and magazines and stuff like that, as one of the classic photos of the crash. One among hundreds, of course, but that was quite a up close one that most people didn't have access to. They took us to Weehawken. Half of the passengers went to the New Jersey side, Weehawken, and then half went to the New York side. And so you can see us. We took over the ferry terminal. They gave us all plastic stuff and to guard from hypothermia. And then they moved us up to a Red Cross center. So you can see a photo of me there. I guess in James Bond terms, shaken but not stirred. So there I am. The plane did sink, so you can see the photos of this. It was pulled over to near Battery Park and then hoisted up onto a barge. So you can see the hoisting operation. You can also take note of the ice. So this is about a day and a half after the crash, and already the Hudson had ice forming on it. And that's salt water with ice, mix of salt water and fresh water. So you can imagine how cold it was on those days. I actually then saw the plane on the barge, so that's the next day, and you can see the damage to the plane. I didn't mention earlier, I think everyone knows, but the reason for the crash was because we ran into a flock of Canadian geese, and each engine took in like 10 geese, they say the way they know that is because they analyzed the DNA of the geese afterwards. One of the engines was ripped off. On the other side of the plane, sunk to the bottom of the Hudson. They recovered it. Was on a lot of media and CNN and all of that. So this following day is pretty key, and this is really in my kind of, I mentioned here the crisis, and I say the healing and the understanding. And part of the healing came from on that day, I didn't have any clothes except from what I was wearing on the plane, and so they took me out to out to get new clothes, out to a department store, and this is the airline personnel and all of that. So we're making the rounds of the department store, and then just doing some other shopping, and I get a call from Don, and it's Don and Elliot. So my buddies Don and Elliot are on the phone, and they're saying, like, hey, yeah, I heard you kind of went for a swim in the Hudson. What's going on? Because I think they probably knew I was in beside myself, in a state of shock, and probably wondering what the hell had gone on. And so they were there to kind of make sure I hadn't completely gone overboard, and that made a huge difference. And so they kind of followed up with me during that whole period. So it was Kappa Sig definitely there, right after it happened. I mean, that was the day after the crash, and I had Elliot and Don on the phone. So it meant a huge amount to me. So you can see the spotlight, lots of media attention, global coverage, all of that. People became Person of the Year, I think. First and only time I'm ever going to be on the cover of Time, as you can see there. But I did make the cover of Time in a very eventful year, which a week after the crash was when Obama was first inaugurated. So that kind of, in terms of timeline, when that happened. So the couple of humorous things here, just comedy, Coach Class, First Class, which you kind of made the rounds. That was at the time of the Obama or Osama bin Laden and terrorism and the Eiffel Towers and all that. You can see the comedy there. So various things like that. If you'd like, by the way, I'm happy to send this slide deck to you. Just let me know if you're interested in it. Couple things on my side. So I decided after a year after that, over a lot of reflection, to leave HP. Decided I want to go into a new adventure, which kind of led to this whole robotics thing. I also took a year off and just traveled the world. And so you can see me in a lot of different places during that year. I spent a lot of time in Asia, just kind of thinking through what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was kind of I call it an adult gap year, or an opportunity for me to reprioritize, think about what I wanted to do, and really wonderful opportunity for me. And it was great. I spent some time even in the U.S. catching up with Don and Elliot that year, I think. So it was good fun and good opportunities all over. It really did change my life, and it was from there that I moved into robotics. So finally, just to kind of close on given the time and maybe allow for a couple questions, was it a miracle? A lot of people say it was a miracle on the Hudson. I say, well, I'm not necessarily religious in that sense, but when you think of a miracle, so first of all, you had a superior pilot who just happened to be on that flight. You can say the airline had 4,000 pilots. I don't know, let's say 100 of those 4,000 could make that decision like he did, that would say, I'm going to crash the plane in the water. I'm not going to go to an airport. So let's say 100 of them would have had that reflex, which is pretty rare. Then you would say, well, he actually executed all the right decisions. So you can have the best plan, but maybe you don't execute it with precision like he did. And so that was to say, maybe out of those 100 pilots, I don't know, maybe 5 of them could have executed it the same way. Who knows? So then what are the chances of the 4,000 pilots that I had one of the 5 on that flight on that day that could have done that? He also found a place to land, and it just happened to exist within glide range. We could have taken off from many other cities and still had Sully in the cockpit and perished, because he just wouldn't have had any place to land within glide range, which we did. So we were lucky with that, where we happened to be. We had clear skies and daylight. 3 hours later, it was the middle of winter, so 3 hours later would have been night, and we would have crashed into boats or a bridge, or we would have cartwheeled or whatever. It had to be perfect executions, and just clear skies and daylight played a role. We had calm water, no storms, no ice. Ice happened a couple days later, and no boats were there. I mean, we were landed right in the middle of where all the ferries were, but we were still close enough to immediate response. And so you think like bam, 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 all of those things just synchronized perfectly to come together. And so that makes you think, well, maybe it was a miracle. I mean, maybe it really was everything coming together. And the fact that everyone lived. I mean, in that kind of a situation, I every time I hear about a plane crash, it really saddens me, because I've been in a plane crash. I know what it's like. It can be awful. Those moments before the plane crashes, you're thinking that's the end of your life, and it's the darkest moment you could ever have. And in a plane crash, it's different maybe from a car crash, because in a car crash, you can try to do something. You can still try to save or get out of it. In a plane crash, you're waiting. And so the fact that, can survive that just means so much more. And when I hear about crashes now, it's really sad, because I know what those people have gone through in their last minutes. So it makes me really thankful, very, very thankful. And it gives me that kind of drive to live every day, do what I can, make the most out of life. So it's real life affirming. And that's where, I would kind of close by saying that, I've never had a nightmare from it, never had any kind of negative feeling. I think because it was so life fulfilling, so much of a positive experience that I, really is. And it also reaffirms some of the things about what we share as a brotherhood, and that it's people, it's fraternity, it's how we choose to spend our time and prioritize, and the things we do that make life fun and valuable and positive. So, and that all comes together. So there you have it. Any questions about the Hudson or the other content?
What was your feeling the next time you flew, Eric?
Really good point. I flew 3 days later. So I came back to Paris, and the airline it was kind of a surprise to me. They had double upgraded me into first class international. And the flight crew was on hyper attention for me to make sure I wasn't going to freak out. And then they started like I think pumping me with drinks, and so I was good. And I think no, I was actually fine to travel after that. I kind of figured, well, this is the kind of experience that happens pretty rarely in life, and so I'm not going to let that hold me back. If I did, then the Canadian geese got the best of me. I kind of need to move on and still fly. Sometimes it can be a bit edgy if it's a real lot of turbulence, but by and large, no problem.
Eric, that's the second time. That's the one that you crashed on. There was another time that you were almost in a plane crash.
Yeah, there was. I knew you were going to say that, Don. Back in '87, I was on that was a real young squirt back then, and I was on a plane out of LA that almost crashed. It didn't. And many of the same kinds of feelings, and in some ways it was actually almost more scary because I was in the middle section of a larger plane. But yeah, so it's kind of the second time. Sully just thought that was amazing. He thought, "Oh my God, you've been through this twice." So anyway, after all that, maybe I don't know who among you might want to fly with me, or make sure you never fly with me. But I kind of I think the timing is it's 21 years in between crashes, so I've still got like another 9 years before my next crash.
Eric, did you see the question that came up in the chat?
No, I didn't. I've been in presentation mode.
So it says, how did the airline handle the situation? How did they cover you after the fact for what happened?
The airline actually was pretty good right at the beginning. I would say in the first 3 days to 2 weeks, they were really hands-on. And then they had minders for us and very much attentive to everything we needed. But what happened after that, though, was they kind of outsourced everything. Like how we get our bags back was outsourced, and then that became kind of not such a great experience. Like I had something stolen out of my bag. People had money stolen out of their bags. But I can't fault them though, because to me, the airline did the best thing possible. They saved my life because they hired the right pilot. And any other person in that role, and I wouldn't be here today. And so I have no fault for the airline. They got me safely out of that situation. So, so I've never had a complaint with them. Some minor, might have been better if they did that, but bottom line, they hired the pilot to save my life. So, any other questions? So, all right.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Hey, Eric, you seem very comfortable talking about this, and you kind of mentioned that you see it as a positive, but, in the world of PTSD hits everybody. Have you had any issues with talking about this in group events, or do you look forward to talking like this?
I'm okay about it. Definitely. I've done a few talks about it over the years. I've done a lot of interviews. But it's a really key question because, and it's one of these things, I could go on, 2 hours, 3 hours about this because there's so many interesting angles. Yeah, there's a huge spectrum of issues among the 150 passengers. We had a couple that unfortunately got divorced as a result because, one of in the couple, I don't know, she wanted to drive and he said, no, let's take the plane. And then, so she's kind of blaming him. And so they kind of had the kids with them. And so unfortunately it causes, and so there are other people that one or two people that never flew again. A lot of people with nightmares, psychological issues, PTSD. So yeah, there's the whole range of things. I think I'm probably on the very far end of people that use it as a real kind of a positive motivation. But I certainly respect others that had a lot more trouble with it. Another anecdote is up until a couple of years ago, the air traffic controller that is pretty well, quite famous in the whole story of the Hudson, he had a lot of guilt issues. And he's like, it was hard for him to break out of that. And everyone was like, come on, you did the best you could. you weren't even on the plane. You couldn't have done anything. You're the air traffic controller. You gave the best advice. And so even people that were not on board had kind of PTSD issues. And he, I think, has kind of come out of it the last few years. I think he's been coaching and all of that. But it was pretty interesting to see even he had pretty serious side effects as a result. Yeah.
Eric, you mentioned kids just in that answer. Were there many kids on the flight?
There were not so many because it was on a Thursday afternoon, like 3 o'clock flight. And so there were maybe 4 kids, I think, or maybe 3 kids on board. 1 infant, though. There was a baby, and that was highlighted in the movie. There was about 3 elderly people, and then everyone else on board was kind of, between, I'd say, 20 and 60. And the biggest contingent were, I think there were 23 employees of Bank of America because they had shuttle between New York and Charlotte, where the plane was going to Charlotte. And B of A is headquartered in Charlotte. So they had a lot of employees on board. There were, just for the record, there were 2 HP employees, 1 other besides me. The HP employee was there for business. I was just there on my own. So, yeah. So.
Hey, Eric, we know this is late at night. We really appreciate you doing this. This has been interesting. I know, we're going to keep trying to do every month or 2 months. We're going to try to pick a different alumni and talk about a subject, but you've had a truly unique life.
Hey, well, thank you. And been a pleasure. And any of you guys, if you want to, you have my email from, I think, the email that Matt sent out yesterday. So if you want to go deeper on this, if you want to slides or go into any other aspect, if you want to get a whiz robot, I'm the man. So let me know. And Dave Bright, I'm going to see you in Amsterdam. So we got to connect.
And Eric, send me the PDF. I'll upload that to the website.
Will do. Awesome. Okay.
All right. Good.
All
Great
right.
to talk to you.
Thanks, Eric.
All
Thanks
right,
very
thank
much.
you.
Hey,